Hi, welcome to Adoption Now, your adoption show. I'm April Fallon. Enjoy this episode. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Adoption Now. I'm your host, April Fallon. Hey, if you're new to Adoption Now podcast, we share real adoption stories told from real people. Adoption Now gives a voice to the adoptee, birth parent, and adoptive parent. Our mission is to help our listeners understand and adopt the whole entire story. Sharing real stories means we also share the joys and challenges of adoption, the love and the loss. And of course, I am passionate about adoption because I am the adoptive mother of 4 beautiful children. We told our stories at the beginning of season 1, and we even adopted our daughter, I think, while we were recording it's season 2. So it was like adoption in real time. It was crazy. It was exciting. And a lot of our listeners could connect to the story because we were actually going through it. I mean, I don't know if some of you listeners can remember, but there was like an episode where it was like, we're getting the baby. And then the next episode it was like, we're not getting the baby. And it was this roller coaster ride that we all go on to some degree. And it just grew the community. And it was awesome to be able to share our journey so publicly. And now she's 5 years old and in kindergarten, if you can believe that. But I'm excited today to share another perspective from an adoptee. Our guest is actually in studio, and he is Native American. Christian has a love for adoption and just really overall a love for life. He and his wife have 2 daughters, and he has been waiting for almost 2 years to be on the show. Christian Markeey, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate you.
Can you believe this?
It is amazing. I'm just really incredibly honored and thrilled to be a part of something bigger than myself.
It's happening. You were super excited when you came to me, we met, and you're like, I got to tell you my story during this party with like 50 kids running around. And I just couldn't believe all that you have been through. And then what an outstanding person you are, just a loving, caring person. You love adoption. You're an advocate. So this is going to be exciting. Let's start at the very beginning of your story, which is really challenging.
Yeah, I think, it was just something that was really near and dear and close to my heart. Yeah, born January 5th, 1992, in Kansas City, Kansas, at my that hospital. I later learned, because I had a lot of questions where I was born, and the reason why, because most of my siblings were not born there, but I was.
Okay.
And so at the time, my father, who was a roofer, that's where the work was. And so ironically enough, out of the 8 kids, I was born there.
Okay.
And that took me quite a number of years to uncover that.
Okay, so you're one of 8 children. Where are you in that
I
lineup?
have 2 younger sisters.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Wow. And so your family was Native American. Wait, but something about medicine man.
Yes.
Is your dad part of?
So kind of my dad's dad was, not involved in, but a little bit more tied into the being a medicine man, which explains a lot of, I think, just spiritual aspects that I keep in my life now, and that really just helps me not only stay grounded within the chaos of the world, but also being Native American and honoring my ancestors, but also living in the 21st century as well too.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so 8 children, you're all living in one place. What happened?
Yes, so we actually kind of bounced around. We were in South Dakota. We were in Minneapolis for quite a bit. And before I eventually met my adopted mother, we were living in Yankton, South Dakota. And there were 8 of us in a kind of faded green trailer that was lifted about 6 feet off the ground. And we lived in that. And those were some of my first memories, both good and bad, that I had of all of us being together. And
then what happened? How did CPS come in?
Yeah, so we actually went through her name was Sister Ann, and she was very close with our family and my mom specifically. And she was looking after us and, would bring us to the church at the time to not only get meals, but also just make sure that we were taken care of, because both my parents were alcoholics and suffered from the alcoholism. And they had the problem, but they didn't seek the solution until it eventually
just overtook
both of them. Yeah. So.
And were all of you removed?
The only 3 who were removed from that house at that time was my 2 younger sisters and I. My mom and her sister she described it as a calling. And she said that, her and her sister hopped in the car after talking to Sister Ann and letting them know that, look, hey, I have this calling. I can't really describe it, but this little boy needs me. And I know that I got a lot of resentment and other rising emotions from my siblings for that, because they felt that I was chosen. But in reality, my mom could only handle me. And her sister, my aunt, could only handle my 2 younger sisters. And all my siblings are older than me.
Okay. We had to back up the story.
Yeah.
So you're living in this place. There's 8 of you, and your parents are alcoholics. Sister comes and helps, right? She's Catholic, I'm going to guess.
Yeah.
It's such a good guess.
Yeah.
And so she comes and she's going to help you. And your mom and her sister somehow come across your family, and she feels like she's supposed to adopt you. So you didn't actually get removed. You were in the foster care system?
So we actually... I did get removed. There was not too much longer after that. My two oldest brothers pretty much were, I want to say, 10 to 12 years older than me. So I really didn't have a whole full, strong memory of them. And they aged out of the foster care system. And then my 2 older sisters, my older brother, they went through the foster care system, and numerous times throughout my life I had gone to visit them in varying houses and homes that they were in at the time.
Okay. So did your adoptive mother see you at the church? How did she connect with you?
Yeah. So she just through working with Sister Ann and her sister, and my mom as well too. My mom, they were all very close.
Okay. And she just had a connection with you.
Yeah. She's like, I really felt like a calling. Like it was you. And I felt like you needed me and I needed you.
Aww.
And so.
And how old were you?
I was about 4. She met me when I was about 2. And around like 4 and a half, 5.
And her sister took your 2 younger siblings?
Yes.
Okay. And then, so that's interesting. So you kind of got to stay together. They didn't separate you necessarily because you're still part of the same family.
Yeah. And that was, for me personally, it was something that I had to really grow accustomed to. But she kept all lines of communication open, and there wasn't a time that I wouldn't be able to reach any of my siblings at the time. And I was, still very connected with my 2 younger sisters.
Okay. So she met you when you were 4. When did you actually go live with her?
I started living with her probably when I was 6.
When you were 6. How did you feel about leaving your parents, though?
It was a lot for such a little
Person,
boy. Yeah. And I just really felt a wave of different emotions. That was something that really I had to work through later in life, of understanding, not shutting off my emotions, because that was when I was little, that was my defense mechanism. It was really tough, but I really grew a lot from the experience and really understood, where she was coming from as well too. And understood that, she's trying to provide a better life for me. And I can love and miss my parents, but if I was to stay there, it wouldn't be as beneficial for me as coming down to Arizona. I came down to Arizona, I think, when I was like 6, probably 5 or 6. And I just fell in love with it.
There are so many complex just emotions connected to the story, and so many questions that I want to ask, because I think people don't really understand that a child loves their parents no matter what. Even if the parent is an alcoholic, a drug user, abuser, they love their parents because they're children. And that statement is huge. Because a lot of times us as adults, we think, oh, they're going to be so happy to come with me because I'm rescuing them. And it's not quite that cut and dry, right? You're leaving people that you really love and you want them to do the right thing and to parent you, but they're not going to do that. And so you go with this woman, but you feel connected to her you love her. And there are some people like you that are just very resilient, and you and my son is like this too. You are determined to see the good. You are determined to find the silver lining, right? And you're determined to heal from the experience. And there are adoptees who don't. I mean, I can tell you right now that when an adoptee in a certain group of people that have a podcast and they're on Instagram, if they were to hear this, they would be super offended at what you're saying. They would be definitely. Like, your life wasn't necessarily better. Don't tell us that we're lucky. We're not lucky. We had to leave our parents, and they feel so upset about what happened. And mainly because they didn't have a voice. Yeah. Right. They never got the opportunity to really express how they were really feeling. And there was a lot of hurt in there. But you're telling it from the perspective of it was what it was and it was hard, but I'm still thankful. How did you get there?
A lot of not only self-care, but self-work on myself. Another fun aspect about this and me being Native American is I'm hitting 3 years sobriety in November. And that has truly just helped impact it and kind of helped me dive back into the messiness of not only my experience, but my parental love as well too. And that's exactly what you're saying. So it's just communication is so big, especially with both my daughters, you know, my 4-year-old's a Capricorn. I tell her, hey, you're born 2 days before me. We're emotional people, honey. We got to express our feelings in a healthy manner. If you don't tell me, I don't know. And that's the same thing with having survived and having gone through this, but coming out on this other side better, stronger, and more loving instead of holding on to a hot coal and expecting it not to burn myself. And it's like, I just, in my own time and effort and love and resiliency, looking back on it, saying, yeah, at that moment, at that time and situation, my mom did what she needed to do. And I still have all the love in the world for both my deceased parents. There's no animosity. There was a lot of baggage that needed to be unpacked, but it was healthy and it was happy. And it was, yes, it happened. There were nights that I did have night terrors. And me being, my mom moved. She brought me down to Arizona because this was her home. And numerous nights I would kick and scream and wake up crying and just want my family. And numerous times and numerous nights she was there for me and was so just loving and just held the space for me that I needed to as a little kid and helped me work through it in order for me to really understand what I was going through and not necessarily just shutting it down right away. Saying, stop being a little kid, stop crying about it. You need to get over it. Right. Because it's a big deal. It is. Especially, you think of 4 or 5 year olds now, like that's their whole world. And, when I work a little bit later at work, my 4-year-old wonders where I am. Right. I'm pretty much her world, my mom and I. So she gets scared when it gets a little bit more rocky. Right. And that was what you were living in daily. People just don't understand that it's fear, it's sadness, it's confusion. It's a lot of emotions for a little person. Did you attach to your mother, your adoptive mother? Yeah, I really, like I said, she described it as we both just really needed each other. And once she knew. And even one of the cutest stories I have from when she first met me was she bought me my first pair of Nikes, and she said, I came back the next day and I went to go wake you up and you had your Nikes on in bed wearing them. Aww. And you were sleeping with the shoebox. Aww. And that was one of the first things that I really, yeah, that was one of the first stories that, she was just really taken aback by.
Wow. Even something just simple as shoes.
Just as simple. And, they were probably just, they were just a pair of shoes. And it meant the world to me, though. It meant so much to me.
And was she married?
She was married at the time, yeah.
Okay. So do you remember that, Dad?
Yeah. So his name was Bruce.
Okay.
Yeah.
And did he parent you, or how did he feel about you?
I want to say, to the best of my knowledge, I think they were actually broken up at this time.
Okay.
And it was just her. And she did the absolute best that she could. And I still felt so welcomed into her family, and had amazing experiences with that as well, too. So,
how did you do in school?
School was a little bit more difficult, but once I kind of, I want to say, just assimilated into it and really kind of was immersed in it, I really did like it. And I really just enjoyed learning. And
did you have any learning difficulties? Do you remember any of that?
Learning difficulties, not as much. I was very clumsy. That was one thing that my mom had to work on with me, was just kind of eye-hand coordination, because I used to fall down a lot as a kid.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I have...
So you weren't playing sports?
Yeah, well, yes. So it was something that that I loved, being outside and doing stuff, but I would just fall down. And in the best way possible, my mom helped me to not only overcome it, but understand that I needed to really pay attention to what I was doing, and, look where I was going. So I move with the purpose and a direction, and not just,
like being self-aware,
yeah,
right?
Yep.
And maybe just that like, this is where my body is going. I have to look. I have a child like this. We're always like, look, and we call her the bobblehead. I'm like, look where you're going. And she's still looking at me and walking. I'm like, no, look in front of you. Don't look at me. And we teach her to stop and be aware of your surroundings and, slow down. What do you need? And that kind of reduces the clumsiness as well, is that she's more self-aware. When did you start drinking?
So this was, first of all, great question. Something that I was taught the facade of what alcohol is, for me and for Native Americans. And I wasn't truly, exposed to it until about 2 weeks before I was 21. And that's when, my, birth father, Tim Brandt, passed away. And I started drinking, and nobody told me that alcohol was going to taste that good, because they have the mixed drinks. They have, it's not going to be this skull chalice with bubbling liquid,
right?
And, in all the ways it's going to ruin your life on the side. It's not like that at all.
Well, you didn't watch Pinocchio.
Yeah.
The new one just came out, and it really depicts it as like, if you drink this, kids, you will turn into a donkey.
Yeah. See?
See, you missed that.
I scooted right over that.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing, is that you never know what's going to happen. Some kids try it and they're like, whatever. And then some are like, this is it.
Oh yeah, and it was fun until it wasn't, and then it just became so toxic and bad for me that I just really needed, a change needed to happen, and reconnecting with my higher power, understanding the way that I was going at that moment in time, why I was going to end up 6 feet under or in prison for life, and just reaching out and surrounding myself with the right people. It was lonely at first, because you get sober and
you have no friends.
All of a sudden, all your friends. I was your friend because I was buying you drinks at the bar.
Right.
I was buying everybody and their friends drinks at the bar. So of course everybody loved me. But once I took that away and I really had to break it down, that's when my wife now just really stood by me, and shout out to her for being as beautiful and as amazing as she is, and strong and resilient, but helping be there in some of my darkest times.
Mm-hmm.
And
what about your birth father dying do you think triggered this grief?
It was anger,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of anger. I just had suppressed that defense mechanism that I told you about earlier. I just was really angry because I think I was about 10 or 11 and I asked myself, why do my parents love drinking more than me? And in reality, it, as heartbreaking as that was for, 11 or 12-year-old to ask, the question needed to be asked. And only later in life would I learn that, they had the problem but didn't seek a solution.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't want to be helped, and that wasn't my fault. And
Right.
I took responsibility for that for a number of years.
You know what? This is so deep and interesting because as a mother, as an adoptive mother, you think if I just love them enough, if I give them Nike shoes, if I do the thing, we can skip over that. We can avoid all of that.
Oh, yeah.
And the truth is, without creating this space to talk, or you don't even know what is sleeping in there, right? With a sleeping giant. Yep. And then all of a sudden something happens and you're surprised. You're really surprised. Like, wait, you were angry all this time, but I thought we were having fun. And that's the complexity of an adoptee, is that there is also this biological side. There's also this painful side, even though you do love your mom and she is amazing.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
She wasn't able to take that part away. And I think that that's really important for adoptive parents to understand, is that no matter how much you love your child, and just even biological parents, you can't take it all away. Your love can't heal everything. And there are times when it will come up, the anger or the confusion. I mean, what advice do you have for adoptees listening to this?
Definitely for adoptees listening to us, one, you're not alone. And I think a lot of people forget that is we're humans. We are emotional beings and we share experiences. We bond through these shared experiences. And, the people who I have by my side today I would have never guessed in a million years that they would be the people by my side. But and my circle is a lot smaller, but it's a lot stronger, more loving, more attentive, and my girls and my wife are included in that as well too. So one, you're definitely not alone. Two, there are others out here, and like I said, we support each other through love, acceptance. And I was actually talking about this with my wife the other day, and my best friend is like, just loving him and her the way they needed to be loved, not how I thought they needed to be loved. And to kind of elaborate on what you said as well too, I think I was 17 and I wrote a suicide note. And because I had a great life and I had so much on the outside, and I was very, very happy and grateful for everything that I had, but I felt such a deep emptiness inside that I didn't really know who I was. And it was really, and my adopted mom and my stepfather at that point, they both sat down and we talked about it. And I was just like, look, I feel so disconnected from not only my culture, but who I am as not only trying to find myself as a Lakota man, but who I'm supposed to be in this world. I was on the verge of being 18, senior in high school. What are you going to do after high school? And I just felt such an emptiness and I did not know where to go at all. And just through definitely therapy and immersing myself and, talking about it, bringing it forward to the forefront really helped me out. And just not being afraid to share, because when you do share your story, you kind of give other people permission to share theirs.
Right.
Because I'm like, well, he went through that. Well, holy cow.
Right.
That's a lot. Well, yeah, I definitely can relate to him on so many different levels.
Right. And not feeling alone. I think that's the main part of why we do what we do, is because we don't want anyone to feel alone. Not an adoptee, not a birth parent, not an adoptive parent. We want you to know that there's a community of people who do understand you. And there's always somebody who's a couple of steps ahead, right?
Oh,
and
yeah.
so you are representing that right? Because you're ahead, you've kind of processed all this, but I have listeners that are just starting the process. They're just opening, that can of worms, so to speak. They're just trying to figure out, what hospital was I born in? What, I didn't love everything about my adoptive family, and exploring all those really scary emotions. And so they can look to you into the story and say, oh my gosh, this is really inspiring. And I know I'm going to make it through. And I'm so glad you didn't kill yourself.
Yeah, I definitely am as well too. And just being able to reach out and being able to provide that lifeline of, I do know where you're coming from. And not only am I here and I'm a living proof of it, but you can do it. And I will be supportive and positive for you and anybody who needs it. Mm-hmm. And going through that trauma, like it took me a while, but I learned to come around, and I learned to not only be as angry at my dad, my birth dad, Tim, and my birth mom, Brenda, for who they were, but also just hold them in a loving space so that I could make peace with it, so I could move forward in a loving, collective manner. Mm-hmm. So I don't have to hold that baggage on.
Right.
And I can look back on it as something that it was tough, but it happened. It made me stronger. I understand what it was and what it is now. And I get to just move on, and I get to do it in a loving, positive, healthy space now.
Right. I think recognizing that they were broken people as well, and they couldn't get out of it. And then here you are kind of going in that path, right? Yeah. And you had to stop. It was like, you knew, I can't do this. I can't become like them. I have to do the work to not do this, to not go into that cycle. And we think sometimes when we pull kids out of the cycle, they'll never go back in that cycle. But it's there pulling them. Yeah. Right? It's there pulling them back. Those native roots and some of the things. And I relate to this because, I'm Native. Yeah, for sure. And so my dad was removed, and our listeners know the story, but my dad was removed, and I grew up with my mom. He was an alcoholic. Mm-hmm. She escaped basically when I was 18 months old. I also went through night terrors. I was I was a very fearful child. Yeah. And my mom always told me that your dad is very sick. That's why he's not here. He's very sick. Oh. And then one day he called, and I talked to him, and he was not very sick, because very sick means he's ill. He can't, he sounded normal. He was fine. Yeah. He's not sick. And then it was like, he just doesn't want you. Yeah. And so my mom had to explain the sickness was alcoholism. And that, I grew up in a home nobody drank, so I didn't even know what that even meant, And it was very hard as a little girl trying to figure out, what does that mean? Why isn't he here? And I had resentment too, in kind of a similar way, different. Yeah, for sure. But then finding him again and going back into the culture, and just being so overwhelmed with my own family roots. The same with how you're feeling is like, I have to stop this. Mm-hmm. I cannot continue the cycle. And even though my mom did pull me away and I was raised differently, I could feel that some of that was pulling me in that direction. And I do have a relationship with my dad. It's not like a perfect relationship, depending on if he's sober or not, and if I'm getting a call in the middle of the night. But, oh, goodness. Yeah. Just being Native is so awesome and beautiful. And it sounds like when you were growing up, some of that was taken from you as well. Yeah, it was. I was definitely just kind of was removed. And, she did it for the better, and it was still really tough when I had to kind of come back around to it, because I needed and wanted for myself to fully understand not only where I was and how I want to present myself as a Lakota man, and being sober, but also what does a great husband look like to me, and how am I going to benefit, be there for my family. Mm-hmm. And how am I going to be different from, my own parents, and how even my adopted parents, I have a lot of great mannerisms from them. Mm-hmm. And I have a lot of other mannerisms as well too, some negative. Mm-hmm. And it's just finding that balance of who I am in this world, not necessarily holding resentment towards them, but understanding in that
moment in time, did I miss being with my siblings? Yes. Did I miss my parents? Of course. It was chaotic and drunk nights, and there were certain memories, of one of my first memories was my dad hitting my mom, and I was hiding behind the couch, and I was clutching onto my Buzz Lightyear, who I still have to this day.
Wow.
And that was one of my first memories. And then the cops coming in, taking my dad, putting him in the back of a squad car and then driving away. And it was, I thought, that's when I realized that defense mechanism, but that was something for me that really, truly stuck. And so, in my early 20s, I thought, okay, chaos is, I've lived in chaos before.
Mm-hmm. It's familiar.
That's normal to me. That's familiar.
Right.
That's what you're supposed to do, right? It's like, no.
No, there's a different way to live.
There's so many other better ways. So
tell me about your siblings.
So youngest is Sabrina, feisty, sassy, funny.
But she's okay. They attached and they're okay.
Yeah. So they both live in Minnesota, and they're both just doing well and doing their thing. And with my older brother Dalton, who I think he's scheduled to come down in October, him and I actually, I want to say around 22 or 23, I went back to South Dakota for a year because of not only choices that I had made that put myself in tough situations, but I really felt like I needed to connect and go home.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
wow.
Yeah.
So you went back?
So I lost both my jobs that I was working at the time, and I got kicked out of my apartment, and I packed all my stuff in my little car, drove, however many states up to South Dakota, and he let me stay with him for about a good 4 or 5 months. I slept on his couch.
What?
Yeah.
And what was that experience like?
I want to say it was kind of my pilgrimage to go home and really see what it's all about for me, because I thought to myself, well, I want to go home and, be in my homeland, because I'm originally from South Dakota, South Dakota.
Right.
And enrolled in the Lakota Sioux Tribe, and as we all are. But it ended up not working out, and just being such a great experience, along with after that my adopted dad did have to come get me because I had gotten myself in over my head, and it just wasn't really healthy for me to be there. And my brother Dalton and we didn't talk for, I think, 2.5, 3 years after that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wait, okay. So your adoptive mom did get remarried, and you did have an adoptive dad. Oh, okay. So the first one went away, but then you did have a dad.
Yeah.
And he loved you.
Yeah.
Okay. And you attached to him.
Yeah.
And you still have a relationship with both of them?
Yeah. So we do.
Good.
Yeah.
That's amazing. It's an amazing journey. I mean, I could talk to you all day, especially about the Native American part and
definitely.
Discovering yourself and the good and the bad and the beautiful things and the spiritual awakening really that happens. And I think that Natives are really gifted with. And even to this day, sometimes my dad will just call me out of the blue. Like he's understands something and knows exactly that I'm going through something. We haven't talked in a while. And then he calls me and it's like, how did you even know that?
Yeah.
There's just this connection. And I think that it's just incredible. And I really could spend the entire podcast on that. But when we end this, I want you to I know you give advice to adoptees, but what's your advice to us adoptive parents raising these sweet kiddos?
That is a phenomenal question. Your presence means more than you could know. And I say that with such love and acceptance, and just by holding that space and being there for them and letting them work through emotions, and just having healthy outlets as well too, is just such a key thing. Because if we say we're fine on top, there's probably something going on inside that will come up or come out later in a more destructive way. And just, it's not always going to be easy, but it's going to be worth it. I still got to try to talk to my wife into adopting.
That's right.
Yeah. So.
Well, your two are little.
Yeah.
Right now, they're beautiful. Christian, I appreciate you coming on the show. I congratulate you on 3 years of sobriety and for fighting through and just telling your story and leaving space for many emotions. This is a place, Adoption Now is a place where you can express happiness and gratefulness and joy and anger and stress and the negative.
Yeah.
That's what we wanted to create, because if we just tell the happy, then we're leading a lot of people into a false expectation of what adoption is, right? But if we only talk about the negative, then like everyone's like sad and no one wants to adopt, and there are children that need homes. And so this balance of really exploring painful things and joyful things is exactly what we want to bring out. And so your story is so inspiring. And I remember when you told me your story the first time, and I feel the same way now, is that I would totally adopt you too. If I saw a 4-year-old Christian, I would adopt you too, because you have a very sweet and kind nature. And like I said, you always want to see the silver lining. And that resilience is such a gift to you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I appreciate, not only the chance to tell my story, but the chance for other adoptees to be able to reach out. And, what you're doing here is absolutely amazing. And it gives me so much hope and light, because I came from such a dark place and such a broken place, but here we are. And I have 2 beautiful daughters who I just absolutely love. I sit back sometimes and I think, this is my life. This is some storybook stuff. I said, this is me? It's like, this is amazing. So yeah, everybody can definitely, just appreciate that presence and holding that space. So,
and have a hope for a future.
Oh, definitely.
Some people right now feel so overwhelmed and lonely and confused about who they are, and there's no hope. But you are here to say there's a hope for a future. Look at this family you have. Look at these beautiful daughters. Look at the life you get to experience. And that happens because you didn't give up.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you so much, Christian.
Yeah, appreciate you. Thank you.
And thank you for listening. If you have an adoption story you'd like to share, please email us at afallon@adoptionnowpodcast.com. We'd love for you to subscribe to our weekly podcast and follow us on social media. Thanks for joining us on your adoption show. See you next episode.